I mean, in the exact moment you're listening to this, while these first few seconds of our deep dive have been playing, your heart has already beaten dozens of times.
Yeah, and it's completely automatic.
Exactly. Your lungs have seamlessly taken multiple breaths without you even, consciously pulling the air in. And your brain, well, simply by processing the words I'm speaking, is burning more energy than literally any other organ in your physical form.
It's wild, right? It happens so automatically that we treat our biology like basically background noise. We just assume the body is this static container that we happen to inhabit.
But the reality happening just beneath your skin is, well, it's relentless dynamic symphony of adaptation, which kind of completely flips the script on how we usually think about health.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings us to the mission for today's deep dive into our source material, the Symphony of Human Physiology. We're throwing out the idea that the human body is a finished product once you hit your 20s.
Right, because it's not a static machine.
No, it's not just a vehicle carrying you from point A to point B. It's a highly adaptive engine that is physically reshaping its own organs minute by minute based entirely on how you move, how you breathe, and how you sleep.
The big paradigm shift in these sources is moving away from the concept of depletion. Like, we tend to think of our bodies like a car. You drive it off the lot, and from that day forward, it's just accumulating wear and tear.
Right. The tires go bald, the engine rusts.
Exactly. But your physiology is actually in this continuous active dialogue with your environment. It responds to the demands you place on it by, well, upgrading its own capacity.
Okay, let's unpack this with a different analogy. Think of your body like a smartphone. You have this device, and it's running dozens of intensive background apps all the time.
Right. Location services, Wi-Fi searching.
Yeah, push notifications, all draining power without you even noticing. Our bodies are doing the exact same thing with basal metabolic rate, regulating temperature, cellular respiration. But here's the key difference.
And this is the cool part.
Yeah. Unlike a phone, the body actually upgrades its own hardware based on how it's used. Like, imagine if using your Maps app every day literally caused your phone's GPS antenna to physically grow larger and more powerful.
That would be amazing.
Right. But that is exactly what your cells are doing.
Yeah, that hardware upgrade is the defining feature of biological life. Your body isn't just depleting a battery, it's actively modifying its own circuitry based on the demand you create.
Makes total sense.
And to run all those complex background processes, you need an incredibly efficient fuel delivery system. For us, that fuel is primarily oxygen, and it has to be pumped relentlessly to every single cell.
Which means we need to look at the engine room, the heart and the lungs. Now, I think most people know the heart pumps blood to carry oxygen, but the sheer volume mentioned in the sources is staggering.
It really is.
The average human heart is pumping roughly 5 liters of blood every single minute.
5 liters a minute at rest. Picture 2.5 large soda bottles being forcefully circulated through thousands of miles of blood vessels every 60 seconds.
Just sitting on the couch.
Exactly. It's a monumental mechanical task. And this is where we see one of the most profound examples of that hardware upgrade we were talking about.
Right, because regular aerobic exercise doesn't just make your heart, work better in some vague sense.
No, it fundamentally alters the physical architecture of the heart muscle.
Okay. Because I was reading about this process called eccentric hypertrophy. If I'm understanding the sources correctly, endurance training actually stretches out the muscle fibers of the left ventricle, which is the main pumping chamber, right?
Yep, the left ventricle. So the chamber physically expands to hold more blood.
Wow.
It expands, and the muscular walls become thicker and more forceful. The technical outcome here is an increase in stroke volume.
Meaning the amount of blood per pump.
Exactly. Every time that upgraded left ventricle contracts, it ejects a significantly larger volume of blood into your circulatory system.
So let me try a different analogy here instead of the standard car engine one. It sounds more like a municipal water system.
Oh, I like that.
If a city is growing and needs more water pressure, they don't just run the same tiny pump at a frantic speed. That would, burn the motor out entirely.
Right.
Instead, they build a much larger pump chamber and widen the pipes.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. Because the chamber is larger and the contraction is stronger, that highly efficient, exercised heart actually has to beat significantly fewer times when you're just sitting around.
It's essentially getting better gas mileage.
Exactly. It can maintain that necessary 5 liters a minute baseline with far less effort. Over the course of a lifetime, a lower resting heart rate saves the body profound amounts of energy.
And the blood that the heart is pumping is entirely useless if it isn't carrying oxygen. Which brings us to the intake valves. the lungs.
The lungs are fascinating.
They really are. And I want to push back on a visual that I think trips a lot of people up. When we picture lungs, we usually imagine two big empty balloons in our chest.
Right, like party balloons.
Yeah. You inhale, the balloons inflate. You exhale, they deflate. But the source material makes it super clear that lungs are not hollow sacs.
Not at all. The balloon visual is terribly misleading. Your lungs are actually dense, highly vascularized, sponge-like organs.
Spongy.
Yeah, and the structure that matters most is totally microscopic. Deep inside that spongy tissue are millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli.
It's described almost like a microscopic honeycomb, where the actual chemical exchange happens.
A honeycomb wrapped tightly in a net of tiny blood vessels called capillaries. When you take a breath in, oxygen diffuses across the incredibly thin membrane of the alveoli directly into your bloodstream.
Okay, I see.
Simultaneously, carbon dioxide is pulled out of the blood and into the alveoli to be exhaled. And what the sources emphasize is that physical training actually drives angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis, meaning the creation of new blood vessels.
Yes. When you demand more oxygen through consistent exercise, your body responds by physically growing new capillaries around those alveoli.
You're literally building a denser highway system for oxygen transport.
Exactly. But if your breathing habits are shallow or you live a super sedentary life, that highway system remains sparse. Your heart then has to pump much faster to compensate for the poor oxygen exchange rate happening in the lungs.
Okay, so we have this upgraded water pump pushing a higher volume of blood and a dense, highly efficient capillary network loading that blood up with oxygen. Where does the lion's share of that precious energy actually go?
Right to the top.
A massive portion of it travels straight up to the command center.
The brain is relentlessly greedy when it comes to oxygen and glucose.
The statistic from the sources that really stuck with me is that the brain makes up only about 2% of the total weight of the human body. 2%.
They're tiny.
Yet, it consumes a staggering 20% of the body's total energy supply. It's like having a tiny, incredibly demanding VIP guest at a huge corporate event who personally consumes 20% of the entire catering budget.
That's exactly what it is. The VIP is managing everything, from your conscious thoughts to your autonomic immune responses, so it demands priority routing for resources.
Right.
And it relies heavily on the physical activity of the rest of the body to keep its supply lines open and optimized.
That connection is just so fascinating to me. We usually separate physical fitness from mental fitness. Like, they're two different hobbies.
We do, but they are completely linked.
Yeah, because the sources show that physical movement directly feeds the VIP. Going for a run isn't just about building your leg muscles or upgrading your heart's stroke volume. You're forcing a massive rush of blood flow straight into the brain.
And that rush of blood is delivering more than just oxygen. It brings vital nutrients and, crucially, it stimulates the release of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
Okay, BDNF.
Yeah, BDNF is frequently described as miracle grow for the brain. It encourages the growth of new neurons and strengthens the synapses connecting them.
Oh, wow.
This is the physiological mechanism behind why exercise directly supports memory formation, concentration, and mental clarity.
So if you're experiencing that classic 3 o'clock brain fog after sitting completely still at your desk for 6 hours, it's quite literally a lack of optimal circulation and neurochemical delivery to your command center.
Exactly. You're starving the VIP.
But it's not just movement that alters the brain state. The sources dive deeply into how our breathing patterns manipulate our nervous system, particularly when it comes to stress.
This is one of the most immediate adaptations we have access to. I mean, most people in modern society operate in a state of chronic low-grade stress.
Deadlines, traffic, endless notifications.
Right. This keeps our sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight pathway, in a constant state of low-level activation. Your body is biologically reacting as if it's being stalked by a predator all day long.
And living in that state is corrosive. I mean,
Yeah.
the cortisol alone degrades tissue over time.
It absolutely does.
But the sources suggest we have a manual override switch, and it's tied directly to our breathing. Like, if you are stuck at your desk feeling totally overwhelmed, does simply changing the pace of your breathing literally flip a biological switch in your nervous system? I want to get into the actual mechanism here, not just the concept.
It does. It comes down to mechanoreceptors in the lungs and the vagus nerve.
Okay.
When you deliberately slow your breathing down, specifically by making your exhales longer than your inhales, you physically stretch the tissue in the lower lobes of the lungs.
Wait, so the actual mechanical stretching of the lung tissue is the trigger?
Yes, the stretch itself. That physical stretch activates mechanoreceptors, which send an electrical signal up the vagus nerve to the brainstem.
And the vagus nerve is like the...
It's the primary highway for the parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode. When that signal hits the brain, it triggers the release of acetylcholine.
acetylcholine.
Right, it acts like a natural tranquilizer. It immediately slows the heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and physically takes the body out of that constant state of hyperalertness.
That is incredibly empowering. We aren't just at the mercy of a stressful environment. The physical act of stretching the lungs commands the brain to release a tranquilizing chemical.
It's an instant hardware override.
Okay, so we've looked at the engine room providing the fuel and the command center directing the resources.
Yeah.
Now we need to look at the physical scaffolding that actually moves us through the world. We're talking muscles, bones, and joints.
This is where the concept of the body as an adaptive engine becomes highly visible. Movement doesn't just utilize these structures. The mechanical stress of movement is the very thing that rebuilds them.
Let's start with bones, because the source material really challenges a common visual here. It explicitly emphasizes that bones are living tissue.
Which is hard for people to picture.
Yeah. Logically, I know my bones are alive, but I think most of us have this ingrained visual from high school biology. We picture the skeleton hanging in the corner of the classroom.
Dry, white, inert scaffolding.
Exactly. Like wooden 2x4s holding up the drywall of a house.
We culturally view bones as the dead framework that the living stuff hangs off of, but human bone is incredibly dynamic. It is a bustling matrix, dense with blood vessels and specialized cells called osteoclasts, which break down old bone, and osteoblasts, which build new bone.
So how does movement cue those osteoblasts to get to work? The sources highlight weight-bearing exercise. If I go lift a heavy dumbbell or even just go for a brisk walk, what is the actual mechanism that tells my bones to get denser?
It's a process called mechanotransduction.
Mechanotransduction.
Right. When you put a mechanical load on a bone, like the impact of your heel hitting the pavement or the intense pull of a muscle tendon tugging against the bone during a heavy lift, that stress actually causes the bone to bend slightly.
Wait, really? The bone actually bends?
On microscopic level, yes. It deforms just a fraction of a millimeter. And that microscopic bending forces fluid through tiny canals inside the bone matrix.
Oh, wow.
This fluid shear stress acts as a direct mechanical signal to those osteoblast cells. It tells them, hey, we're experiencing heavy structural loads. We need to reinforce the scaffolding.
So they get to work.
Exactly. The osteoblasts immediately start laying down more calcium and structural proteins, building stronger, denser bone.
Use it or lose it. If you don't provide that mechanical bending, the body assumes it doesn't need to waste energy maintaining heavy, dense bones, and it just lets the osteoclasts strip the minerals away.
That's exactly what happens.
That explains why resistance training is so vital as we age. But what about the hinges connecting all this living scaffolding? The joints.
Joints present a unique biological challenge. Many of them, particularly in the knees, hips, and spine, do not have a robust direct blood supply to the cartilage.
So they can't heal the normal way.
Right. They can't rely on the circulatory system to deliver nutrients in the same way muscles do. Instead, they rely on a substance called synovial fluid.
The sources describe synovial fluid as a thick liquid that lubricates the joints and feeds the cartilage. But there's a catch. It relies on movement to circulate.
It needs agitation.
So let me try an analogy. It makes me think of a bicycle that gets left out in the rain.
Oh, yeah.
If you ride it every day, the movement keeps the grease warm, it coats the chain, and everything glides smoothly.
Yeah.
But if you just lean it against the wall in the garage for 3 weeks, the grease congeals and the gears get completely stiff and rusty. Is prolonged sitting basically doing that to our joints?
The rusty bike is an excellent parallel because synovial fluid is what physicists call a non-Newtonian fluid. It is thixotropic.
Thixotropic. Okay, define that for me.
It means its viscosity changes based on how much it is agitated.
Oh, okay.
When you're sitting completely still for hours at your desk, the synovial fluid becomes thick, almost gel-like. You're literally starving your joints of mobility. The fluid isn't circulating and the cartilage isn't getting nourished.
It's just gunked up.
Pretty much. But the moment you start moving, walking, bending, stretching, the mechanical agitation causes the synovial fluid to thin out and become slippery. It coats the cartilage, absorbing shock and delivering nutrients.
This is why prolonged sitting makes your hips and spine feel so incredibly stiff. Movement is the literal physical lubricant.
Without movement, the gears rust.
Wow. So movement thins out the synovial fluid to oil the joints, and it forces fluid through the bones to signal the osteoblasts. But what about the muscles that are generating this movement? We all know exercise builds muscle, but the source material throws a massive curveball about when that adaptation actually occurs.
There is a fundamental misunderstanding about how fitness works. Vigorous physical activity, specifically resistance training, doesn't build muscle.
Wait, it doesn't.
No. It creates tiny, microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. You are inducing localized trauma.
I really want to emphasize this point for everyone listening. When I'm lifting heavy weights or doing a grueling workout, I am actively getting weaker in that moment. I am breaking the tissue down.
You're leaving the gym structurally weaker than when you walked in. The exercise is the stimulus. It is not the adaptation itself.
Okay, so when does the adaptation happen?
The actual hardware upgrade, the synthesis of new muscle proteins to patch those micro tears and make the fiber thicker, happens exclusively when we power down.
So if we imagine the body as a high-rise construction site, the workout, the exercise, is just the demolition phase. We're swinging wrecking balls, tearing down the old walls, creating absolute chaos.
Right.
The exercise is just making the mess. The actual building happens during the night shift. Sleep is the specialized construction crew that rolls in at midnight with the blueprints and the raw materials to build a newer, stronger skyscraper.
That's spot on. And if the night crew never gets enough time on the site, you're just left with a pile of rubble. Muscles do not grow during the workout. They grow during recovery.
Which is why rest days are so important.
Absolutely. The sources frame sleep as arguably the most powerful biological tool in existence because it's the designated period for major systemic repair.
I read this section on what happens in the brain during sleep, and it completely blew my mind. I always thought sleep was just the brain turning off to save power.
Yeah.
But it's an intensely active physiological state. We're talking about the glymphatic system, right?
Yes, the glymphatic clearance system. This is a relatively recent groundbreaking discovery in neuroscience.
Okay, lay it on me.
During deep sleep, the glial cells in your brain, which are the supportive cells around your neurons, actually shrink in size by up to 60%.
Wait, the physical cells in the brain shrink.
They shrink specifically to widen the microscopic spaces between them. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to rush through the brain tissue like a biological street sweeper. It physically washes away the metabolic waste products that have accumulated during the day's neural activity, including toxic proteins like amyloid beta, which is heavily associated with Alzheimer's disease.
So if I'm chronically shortchanging my sleep, I'm not just feeling groggy. I am literally preventing my brain from washing away its own toxic exhaust. The VIP is swimming in waste.
You are operating a highly complex engine without ever changing the oil. Without adequate sleep, the glymphatic system can't clear the brain, the hormones required for tissue repair aren't released, and the osteoblasts can't properly reinforce the bone matrix.
Everything falls apart.
Exactly. Every single system we've talked about is left operating at a severe deficit. Rest is not the absence of activity. Rest is the biological realization of the physical work you put in during the day.
It fundamentally changes how you view your daily routine. It means that everything is connected. You can't out-train a terrible sleep schedule because the night crew has to do its job.
Right.
And you can't optimize your brain function if your heart and lungs aren't delivering the resources.
The sources present a unified theory of human health. When we look at this whole picture, walking isn't just about burning calories. It's physically agitating synovial fluid to lubricate your joints and pumping 5 liters of blood to maintain cardiac stroke volume.
And lifting weights isn't just about aesthetics. It's introducing mechanical stress to bend the bones and signal osteoblasts to lay down calcium, while intentionally tearing muscle fibers so the night crew has a reason to synthesize new proteins.
Even something as seemingly passive as breathing is a direct control mechanism. Long, slow exhales are mechanically stretching your lungs, firing the vagus nerve, and flooding your system with acetylcholine to forcefully lower your heart rate and combat chronic stress.
The ultimate takeaway here is the concept of relentless adaptation. Your organs are constantly responding to your daily habits. Every single movement you make, every breath you take, and every hour you sleep is a biological signal. You're literally teaching your body how it needs to function tomorrow.
The human body is incredibly literal. It assumes whatever you are doing today is exactly what you will need to survive tomorrow, and it reshapes your physical form to match that demand perfectly.
The body is always taking notes. Which brings us to a final thought for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We started this deep dive by noticing the physical reality of the breath you're taking right now.
Right.
But I want you to expand that view and look objectively at the entirety of your last 24 hours. Think about the physical movements you did or didn't make. Think about your breathing patterns, your stress levels, and the quality of the sleep you allowed yourself to get. Since your cells are constantly taking notes on your habits to physically rebuild your anatomy for the future, well, based on your last 24 hours alone, what exact kind of tomorrow is your body preparing for right now?